Go ahead and get started, and I would like to welcome you all to our 2022 Martin Luther King celebration, couple weeks actually, Unity Gathering. And today is really a blessing that we have this technology, that we can get together even when the pandemic decides to throw us another variant. And here we are trying to be safe rather than eating a beautiful luncheon gathering at Westminster College, though this allows us to have a few more people from farther abroad with us. And so we thank you all that have come to join us on this day, where we will not only recognize some individuals that have done great work that really reflects some of the work of Martin Luther King in our community, as well as hear a wonderful keynote from a relatively newer arrival to the Salt Lake Valley. Dr. Moses, Oscar Moses, is a new member within Calvary Baptist Church and is leading the way to bring more light to our community and awareness and consciousness, and we are thrilled to have him. We will begin today, though, with some student involvement. And I believe I saw one of our students, Samantha Paredes, who is one of the seniors that is here and willing to engage, even though so exhausted after 2 years of being in an educational environment where we have had to pivot to move to online in a more intentional way. And so Samantha is going to introduce in just a minute a recording that is not as good as we'd love, because someone recorded it and did her best a week ago at a march and rally that we had as part of our Martin Luther King celebrations. So in a minute, I'll turn it over to Samantha to share a little bit about the history of this song that she is going to share with us first, before I turn the time over to Tamara following her presentation. I'd also like to welcome members of the Salt Lake Interfaith Roundtable here today that are joining our Westminster community. That this organization has been involved since 2002 with trying to create greater understanding, love, and harmony in our community across the great divide of religions and spiritual beliefs. So thank you, members of the Roundtable, and also thank you for the recent letter that I know it took some work to pull together thoughts of many different communities to address the anti-Semitism that is so current and ravaging our communities. And so the letter that was sent from the Roundtable out to the community in Texas, but also to different communities here in Salt Lake, was so well received. And just to know that we are there for each other. And today, this Unity Gathering is one other example of us coming together and hopefully being there and learning a little bit more about each other. We will do some breakout rooms later on in the gathering that you can get to know some of your fellow members of this community. And I will now, if we can find Samantha on the screens, have her introduce her song. And you will also get to see a little bit of the gathering that we had on Westminster campus on Monday. Is that right? When was it, Tamara?
Last Thursday, January 13th.
Okay, and Tamara will be talking to us in just a minute as well. So thank you. Samantha, are you?
Yeah, hi guys. Hi guys, it's Samantha. Sorry, my camera isn't on. I like just woke up like half an hour ago, so I don't look great, but so I just want to introduce this song. I actually, the cool thing is that I heard this song when I was a freshman in college. I remember that there was a junior who sang it. His name's Jared, and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. He sang it in choir class. And I remember that there was something, it seemed particularly poignant because he's Black, and he was singing this song about standing up and being heard. And I felt like that was something significant, but since I was not familiar with the musical it was from, I only could I could only be impacted by the words themselves. And so this song is called Make Them Hear You, and it is from the musical Ragtime. And the context of when this happens in the show is this character has lost a lot, and he's a Black man living in America in the 1920s, and his wife was killed by police violence. Or I don't know if it was his wife, but it was his partner. And I believe that she was pregnant at the time. And so he lost two people who are like the most important people in the world to him. And there's a younger man who he has been talking to, who has been expressing this desire to do something in a more violent way against what has been happening, because they have been experiencing so much violence themselves. And he says, yeah, that is an effective way to protest. Violence is effective, but it is also very effective to be heard by your words. And so he comes up here, and the song is a speech to everyone in attendance listening to him. And he says, make them hear you. That is the most important thing, is that you will make them hear you with the power of your words, and like the strength of you as people. And I think perhaps the most poignant part about this is that shortly after this song, he is killed. And so this becomes kind of like a martyrdom almost, that like seals this, and why I feel that it is so impactful. So that's what this song is about.
Thank you, Sam. And here we are. This is Samantha, who you didn't see, but you are now, singing the song.
Go out and tell our story. Let it echo far and wide. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. How justice was our battle, and how justice was denied. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. And say to those who blame us for the way we chose to fight, that sometimes there are battles that are more than black or white. And I could not put down my sword when justice was my right. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Go out and tell our story to your daughters and your sons. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. And tell them in our struggles we were not the only ones. Make them hear you. Make them hear you. Your sword can't be a sermon or the power of the pen. Teach every child to raise his voice, and then, my brothers, then will justice be demanded by 10 million righteous men. Make them hear you. When they hear you, oh, they knew
Wow.
Thank you, Samantha, in person and in recording. Tamara.
Yes, thank you, Samantha, for that wonderful rendition. It was amazing to see it in person as well, and to hear your voice in both the passionate way that you expressed that song. I'm here and I'm delighted and honored to be with you this morning to share in this celebration and as part of this unity gathering. And in my role as Chief Diversity Officer here at Westminster, I am just always amazed and appreciative of those who make our Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Week possible, and our diversity work that we get to do here on campus. And so what's on the screen now are our sponsors, and I'd like to begin with acknowledging the B.W. Bastian Foundation, who is the signature sponsor of our Diversity Lecture Series, which has been in place 2 decades. And so that commitment from the college and from the B.W. Bastian Foundation has been solidified and just continues to allow us to stretch and add and diversify the voices and perspectives that exist in the world, of course, in Utah, on our campus, toward unity, diversity, and community. The other sponsors that you see listed here, again, are just a wonderful community partners in terms of our sponsorships as well. Cigna, Mark Miller Subaru, Jones Waldo, Rocky Mountain Power Foundation, and Zions Bank. So again, thank you. Help me appreciate them for the work they help us to do and the community partnerships we've been able to establish, sustain, and move forward in. I'd also like to acknowledge the Martin Luther King Jr. Planning Committee, many of who are in the room this year or today. And we initially began this event as an in-person event, but we had to pivot. And so this committee helped us to make that pivot as seamless as possible. And that's demonstrated by the fact that we have almost 75 participants in the room today. And we had to even adjust this morning to expand our meeting capacity because of the interest and demand of wanting to spend this time with us today. I'd like to acknowledge our ASL interpreters, because disability is diversity. And so we wanted to make sure that this can be as accessible as possible as technology allows us to do so. I'm especially excited to share with you this year's awardees for our Unsung Hero Awards, which this event was started by my predecessor, Dr. Marco Barker, in fall 2017, where we acknowledge students, staff, faculty, and community organizations and community members who are doing work to advance diversity, community, and who go beyond the call of duty in the work that they do. And so with that said, I'd like to begin with our student awardee, Sophie Caliguiri. And Sophie, please forgive me if I did not get that name correct. I did practice it. She is a senior at Westminster College, and she will receive her honors degree in philosophy with a minor in English this May. She's worked at the Dumpke Center for Civic Engagement for 4 years. She's held this position as team lead for the community engagement team for the past 2 years. She's an assistant director at the Westminster's Writing Center, a member of the Ethics Bowl team, a copy editor, and contributor to the honorable mention, and a proud first generation scholar. Sophie has also been a member of the MLK Planning Committee for, I think, all 4 years. And I asked her how she goes to class, but clearly she is an amazing academic to be able to accomplish what she's done, and has been such a wonderful contributor to our campus community, and will be a wonderful contributor with the legacy that she has left. I'm going to go through all of the awardees, and then you can give your visual and verbal applause at the end. I'd also like to mention that these awardees are selected and nominated by our campus community. So it wasn't just random people were selected. People had to submit nominations and write-ups. And clearly, Sophie and all of our awardees bubbled up to the top, but there were so many to choose from. And so that's a good thing to be able to do. Our staff awardee is Nancy Brown, and she joined the institutional advancement team at Westminster in 2016. She loves working in the nonprofit sector. She's been a fundraiser for higher education and children's healthcare for many years. She worked in the Utah Governor's Office for nearly a decade and is passionate about civic engagement and community participation. She is a former president of the Utah Planned Giving Roundtable and the Utah Society of Fundraisers, and a vice president of the Salt Lake Rotary Club. She earned her BS in communication from the University of Utah and 2 professional certifications from the Nonprofit Academy for Excellence at the University of Utah. And on a personal note, Nancy and I do what we call good trouble in salute to the late Congressman John Lewis. And in the past year alone, or past couple of years alone, we've just been able to do some amazing work, including bringing money to the college in support of our underserved and underrepresented students. And Nancy has been at the forefront of that, just being such an amazing partner and advocate. And so again, well-deserved, and a well-deserved honor here. Our faculty awardee is Megan Wall. She is a dance artist, educator, and advocate who lives and works on the ancestral lands of the Utah, Goshute, and Eastern Shoshone people. Megan's creative research lies in healing-centered and equity-oriented method of training the body toward performance, and she advocates for access to dance across a spectrum of dancing bodies. She currently serves as the chair of Westminster's dance program, having enjoyed faculty positions at the Ohio State University, Princeton University, Temple University, and the University of Utah. Megan is a relatively new faculty member to the college and has just made such a tremendous impact around our diversity work, including our work with our disability services office. And I'm delighted that I think her parents are with us today. They live out of state. So the fact that this technology allows us for her family to be here to celebrate her is a wonderful thing. And our campus unit is Geo Valley Library. Westminster's library recognizes that diversity, equity, and inclusion are imperative to the success and strength of the library and campus community. Daily and governing practices align with their commitment to inclusive excellence. And in 2018, the library made materials that advance Westminster's commitment to DEI one of its 5 collection development priorities. Library staff actively seeks input from students, faculty, and staff to create and promote a DEI collection to the campus community. The Geo Valley Library strives to provide welcoming and inclusive collection services and spaces as it fulfills its mission of fostering student success and creating a community of lifelong learners. And under the direction of Emily Swanson, the library, if you think about a college, you think about a library, and even through the global pandemic, how this library has had to pivot, but maintain the same level of services and access for our students for their learning. And so we are very delighted to recognize the Geo Valley Library today. And our final awardee this year is our community partner, a community organization called Plan B Theater. And this theater develops and produces unique and socially conscious theater created by Utah playwrights. They are the first professional arts organization in Utah history, led by an artist of color, and the first to be led by a majority POC board. Plan B Theater is committed to gender parity. Plan B Theater is committed to LGBTQIA two-spirit plus equality. Plan B Theater is an anti-racist and anti-racism, excuse me for that. And Plan B Theater is anti-ableist and anti-ableism. They acknowledge that our spaces are located on the unceded ancestral lands of the Confederated Tribes of the Goshute Reservation and the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation. I will stop sharing so that our awardees may be acknowledged and forgive me with this technology. There we go. I know that they're in the room. And if we can, I don't know if we'll have a chance to pin them so you can see them, but help me give them a generous round of verbal and visual applause for these well-deserving awardees. They do have their awards, so we're gonna make sure we get some pictures of them with their awards, and we will share them on our social media and other places so you can see the beautiful award that it is. So thank you so much, awardees, and thank you all for being here to help us celebrate them. Now I have the special pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the Reverend Dr. Oscar T. Moses, and I will share the bio so you can learn more about our keynote. The Reverend Dr. Oscar Terence Moses is the 24th pastor of the historic Calvary Baptist Church in Salt Lake City, Utah, beginning his pastoral tenure in January 2020. Under his pastoral leadership at Calvary, Dr. Moses established the Pastor Emeritus France A. Davis Day to honor Reverend Davis's contributions to Calvary and to celebrate his birthday. Dr. Moses has implemented partnerships with local, national, and international community organizations and has sustained the spiritual and community functions of the church during the COVID-19 global pandemic by providing virtual worship services. Dr. Moses holds doctoral and master's degrees in ministry and theological studies, along with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice with a minor in religious studies from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. So I've had the distinct pleasure to meet and talk to Dr. Moses, even in planning this event, and he was so pastoral in acknowledging the multiple connections that have been made, and being from Utah, so a fellow Midwest native. I appreciate that Midwestern connection and understanding wind chill and snow in winter, but Utah has some easier winters than the Midwest. So I'm so excited to be able to welcome Dr. Moses to Westminster. And though I wish this could have been in person, there will certainly be opportunities to welcome you, Dr. Moses, to campus in person to see this beautiful campus. And since it's pretty close to where the church is located, I think that'll be easy to do. So thank you for being with us this morning, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stevenson, to the students, faculty, the staff, alumni, and friends, to the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Jan Saeed, and to the Chief Diversity Officer, Dr. Tamara Stevenson, who brings such fresh and a warm spirit to whatever environment she's in. Dr. Stevenson and I have had some great conversations. I called her last week and I think I scared her. I was calling to make sure I stayed on task with the mission. And she said, "What you calling me for? You not calling the council?" I said, "No, just calling to make sure I stay on task." I see some of Calvary sprinkled throughout. I see some other partnerships. Zaynep, I see you, the Stovall's and Pastor Marlon Lynch, and so many other people that I'm thankful to have made a connection with in these 2 years that I've been here in Utah at the Calvary Baptist Church. It's been a tremendous experience, a challenging experience. And so therefore I'm honored on today to share with the Westminster community on this MLK celebration week. This icon, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we're celebrating the legacy of his work, worldwide work for freedom, justice, and equality. The world at large is a better place because of the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're familiar with the work, most of us are, of Dr. King. And we're familiar with, in 1995, how two major events really launched his civil rights career. It was the Montgomery Bus Boycott, along with the death of Emmett Till from Chicago in Money, Mississippi in 1955. In December of 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to vacate her seat at the back of a city bus in Montgomery to yield her seat to a white passenger. The Montgomery Bus Boycott was a political and social protest campaign against the policy of racial segregation on the public transit system of Montgomery. It was a foundational event in the civil rights movement in the United States. The campaign lasts for 1 year from December of 1955 to December 20th of 1956. It ended when the federal ruling Browder versus Gale took effect and led to a United States Supreme Court decision that declared the Alabama and Montgomery laws that segregated buses were unconstitutional. Now, here's just a small caption of a 13-year time frame that encapsulate the legacy of Dr. King. In 1957, African-American clergy named him the leader of SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. That same year, Dr. King at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. gave his first national address, "Give Us the Ballot," at a prayer meeting with ministers present. In 1961, after the initial group of Freedom Riders seeking to integrate bus terminals are assaulted in Alabama, King addressed a mass rally at a mob siege Montgomery church. He later met with President John F. Kennedy and urged him to issue a second Emancipation Proclamation to eliminate segregation. 1963, many of you are familiar, when King responded to 8 Jewish and Christian clergy's advice that African Americans should wait for justice. King penned the letter from Birmingham jail, where he called clergy leaders and who took a moderate position to task, who were sitting on the fence of racism. He called them to task, and he emphasized the urgency of now. In 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom attracts more than 250,000 demonstrators in the Lincoln Memorial. And that's where he delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. 1964, King was named the Man of the Year by Time magazine. 1965, in an event that we know as Bloody Sunday, voting rights marchers were beaten as they tried to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge. On the 6th of August, 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, calling the day a triumph for freedom as huge as any victory that has ever been won on any battlefield. The law came 7 months after King, along with SCLC, pressuring Congress to pass such legislation. In 1966, that was a great year. King and his wife moved into an apartment at 1550 South Hamlin Avenue in Chicago, Illinois, to draw attention to Chicago's poor housing conditions. I was 4 days old on August the 5th, 1966, as King marched in Marquette Park. He was met with a barrage of bricks, attacks, verbal assaults, and King himself said that Chicago was one of the most racist cities in the world. Remember that. He says Chicago was one of the most racist cities in the world. 1967, King delivered a sermon titled "Beyond Vietnam," which angered a lot of people. Even clergy and closer friends began to distance themselves from King. On March 28th of 1968, King led a march of 6,000 protesters against a strike for sanitation workers in Memphis. The march descends to violence, looting. King is rushed from the scene. April 3rd, 1968, King returned to Memphis, determined to lead a peaceful march. During an evening rally at the Mason Temple Church in Memphis, King delivered his final speech. "I've been to the mountaintop. On April 4th, 1968, King was shot while standing on the balcony at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. Had he survived, Dr. King would have been 93 years old. Now, I gave this brief timeline because what King did in a matter of 13 years should be noted and not neglected. He literally changed the world. And so the relevant question for me is, what lesson has the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught the world? What impact has he made for the world? What lesson have I learned from his legacy? What is the clarion call? What is the clarion call? And with these questions, with these series of questions, I'd like to lay the theme for this discussion for the few minutes that we have to share. The impact Dr. Martin Luther King has had on the world and what that means for me. I want to subtitle this little speech, The Clarion Call for Change. The Clarion Call for Change. I'll say that one more time. The clarion call for change. The world could never exhaust or absorb the impact that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has made. So for sake of time and sensitivity of the task today, allow me to give 4 impacts that I see. 4 impacts that I see that he's obviously made on the world, calls to action, if you will. Then I'll give a few takeaway points and I'll share my own story. The first thing that Dr. King's legacy has left us is a call that we are to be connected. A call to be connected. As a deep Christian, King engaged with all faiths. He was comfortable meeting with presidents and potentates, royalty and rascality. King was not indifferent, no matter of the ethnical, emotional, educational, or environmental scripting in which you were honed from. This is an African epistemology that differs from a Cartesian epistemology. A Cartesian epistemology says, I think, therefore I am. But King's call to be connected expounded on Ubuntu. That means not that I think, therefore I am. I am because we are. King's call to be connected veered from the Western philosophy of rugged individualism to the beloved community. King said, God is not interested merely in the freedom of Black men, brown men, and yellow men. But God is interested in the freedom of the whole human race and the creation of society. King called us to be connected. King also called, we are called to be consistent in every context concerning racism. Let me be clear. We are called to be consistent in every context concerning racism. If we are to honor the dream, if we are to dream, or if we are to be effective in diversity, equity, and inclusion, we must be consistent in what we do throughout the entire year concerning the issue of racism. This month, many will mention the dream, racial equality, the beloved community, how we should judge one another by the content of our character, not by the color of the skin. But what will we say after this celebration is over? Many will retreat to a place of comfort and convenience and ignore the inequities of life that continue to plague the disinherited. College campuses will check this month off of their diversity, equity, and inclusion list of things to do. Many companies will have met their mission statement and return to business as usual. Many churches will remain silent on racism behind stained glass windows. What many do not know is that although we see the famous picture of Reverend Billy Graham and Dr. King together, Graham rejected the vision of racial harmony King imagined, musing that something that audacious would only be accomplished in heaven, never on earth. King noted that the lack of consistency, even in what the white church said and what they did, there was a disparaging gap between their orthodoxy and their orthopraxy. So from a jail cell in Birmingham, 1964, King wrote that when he started the boycott in Montgomery, he felt he would be supported by the white church. Instead, some have been outright opponent, King says, refusing to understand the freedom movement and misrepresenting its leaders. All too many others have been more cautious than courageous and have remained silent behind stained glass windows. King called for us to be consistent concerning our orthodoxy and our orthopraxy concerning racism. Orthodoxy, what you believe, orthopraxy, how that's carried out. But then third of all, we are called to the challenge to live peacefully. We're called to the challenge to live peacefully. King, as far as I know, never expressed the phrase, no justice, no peace. But he lived out those words. He understood that to have true peace, there must be justice, and that peace that well-maintained injustice was deceptive. That 1963 letter from the Birmingham jail, King called for a transition from an obnoxious negative peace in which the Negro passively accepted his unjust plight to a substantive and positive peace in which all men with respect and dignity and worth of human personality, if there's to be peace on earth and goodwill toward men, we must believe in the morality of the universe and believe that all reality hinges on moral foundations. Here's the last call to action. We are called to a cause that's worth dying for. King inspired a wave of young activists, Black and white, to take up the cause. He energized people by setting a tone. In February 1960, Greensboro and Nashville, Black students sat down at lunch counters and refused to leave until they were served. It provoked white segregationists to violence. But in May 1961, 13 activists, Black and white, calling themselves Freedom Riders, boarded 2 buses in Washington, D.C. to desegregate bus lines in the South. The late Congressman John Lewis and Diane Nash were part of shaping that movement. And they understood the importance of media coverage. Diane said that they wanted to make sure that they were clear in the media as to what they were doing so that there would be no room for ambiguity or room to confuse what the Freedom Ride was all about. So Diane Nash was elected to be the coordinator. But the story is told that when Nash and Lewis and the Freedom Riders were on the move, one of John F. Kennedy's aides, John Siegenthaler, told Diane Nash, they plan to kill you when you get to Mississippi. He didn't want the Freedom Riders to continue out this demonstration. He told Nash, you're going to get people killed on this Freedom Ride. You're going to die on this Freedom Ride. She said, you don't understand. We signed our last will and testament last night. We understand exactly what we're facing, sir. She said the night before they boarded the bus going for the Freedom Riders, a lot of those Freedom Riders handed her sealed envelopes with their last will and testament to mail to their loved ones in the event. They were willing to die for a cause. They were met by Klansmen. They were beaten. They were dragged. Both Black and white were dragged and beaten. King paid the ultimate price for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that is his life. Let me pose my question to you again, then I'll get out your way. What was the clarion call to change? What is the takeaway? Change begins with acknowledging the past. Acknowledging the sins of what went wrong initiates a genuine conversation. Counter stories, who Derek Bell calls the faces at the bottom of the well. The counter story is one of the foundational tenets of critical race theory that listens to and brings forth the actual lived experiences of people who have been disenfranchised and disinherited. The history of America cannot be one-sided. The counter stories or counter memory says that if the hunter only gets to write the narrative, there will always be a victorious outcome over the lion. But if the hunted or the lion writes the story, there'll be a different outcome. Acknowledging the past and hearing counter stories allow us, the lion, to tell his truth. Number two, change begins with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We must come to the grips with the quantitative representative of our differences. We cannot continue to place one group over the other. The playing field and access to opportunity must be universal. There must be equal distribution of power in the world. Diversity can be a smokescreen. I'll say that again. Diversity can be a smokescreen. It can appear to look one way in the public eye, but yields no decision-making power in the boardroom where policies and decisions are changed. The significance of King in this racially charged climate is to ground the spiral climate of denial of equity, whether it is voter rights, police brutality, or access to fair housing in Utah. We have made some progress in the dialogue, but not in demonstration. I close with this. Change begins at home. Change begins at home. It starts with a conversation that your children hear coming from you at home. I came to Utah from what Dr. King called the most racist city in America. Chicago was segregated by South Side, West Side, and North Side of the city. When Blacks moved into most white communities that were invested, whites immediately moved out. It's called white flight. I was born on 77th and Green in a neighborhood that was all Black. My grandparents had a picture that most families had in their home of President Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And up until the age of 5, I can't recall ever experiencing racism. Partially because the neighborhood was all Black, and partially because of the protection of my parents. My parents decided to move the family 2 miles west when I was 6 years old to 80th and Hermitage in Chicago. When we first moved there, we were the first African-American families on the block. I made friends with a little white kid named Jimmy, another one named Neil Gates. They were my first white friends. However, suddenly that changed when Jimmy changed. Went out to play one day and he called me a nigger. I was confused at 6 years old. I didn't know how to navigate that or really the impact of what that meant. I told our aging cousin, Lillian Gladdy, who babysat my brother and I while my parents were at work, her saddened eyes, she just told me, you can't play with Jimmy anymore. Within a year, the whole neighborhood was predominantly African-American. We learned growing up not to go past Western Avenue in Chicago in the 1970s because they would beat up Black people over there. After the death of my father in 1976, my mother moved us to the south side, to the southeast side in 1980 to an area where Blacks were thriving. We were not too far from a neighborhood called Peel Hill. It was called Peel Hill because that's where the Black doctors live. That's where the Black professionals, the Black physicians live, and even lawyers live. We saw Black folk thriving, doing good. However, I was warned not to venture past the viaduct on 95th Street in Colfax. I was about 13 years old riding, trying to get to a friend's house. I got turned around and ended up past the viaduct into a white neighborhood. I remember getting some uninviting looks. An older white woman who was sitting on the porch leaned over and said, hey boy, you're in the wrong neighborhood. Thank God I found my way back west of the viaduct. I played football in high school. My junior year in high school, we played Marian Catholic, a mainly all white school in the suburbs. We were not expected to win, but we did. Not only did the students yell racial slurs, but as we were leaving the locker room to board the bus, our coach said, fellas, you better put your helmets on. Our team and our bus was met by a firestorm of bricks thrown by both white parents and students and parents. College and the workforce experienced the same. But here's the twist. Then the Lord calls me to ministry, where I was challenged to see life from a biblical worldview. and to try to make sense of this all. I had to look to someone in my lifetime to help navigate that what God was calling me to. It was Jesus, but it was also Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His faith challenged my faith to love all God's children. It was a call to change. I had to come to grips that there were some good people in the world, Black or white, and there were some bad people in the world, Black or white. In King's final book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? He provided his most expansive vision of inclusive, diverse, and economic for the world. For King, love is a key part of creating communities that work for everyone. God moved me from Chicago. It was a calling. He moved a Chicago kid who knows racism all so well, to a place predominantly white to teach me a lesson about change. When I came to Utah, God placed some of the most loving people in my life, white, Black, Hispanic, and others, that allowed me to have a paradigm shift. There's a white lady at the Calvary Church that I call Mama D. She loves me and I love her. God sends me to the church that mirrors King's beloved community. White, Black, Hispanic, we're all family. If the world can have a paradigm shift and we can see one another as all God's children made in the imago Dei, the image of God, that would be the world answering, here it is, the clarion call for change that Dr. King lived and died for. I close with these final words from Dr. King. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. God bless you. God keep you. It's my prayer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oscar Moses. What a gift to have you with us today. You brought tears and tears of joy and tears of definitely sadness to my heart as you shared your story for us all. Let me unpin. Let's see if I can get this done. Tamara, can you help here?
What do you need?
We just need to move back to the group.
Okay.
Oh, I think here we go. Okay. I would like to introduce a couple students now that we will be going from the story that was so generously shared by Dr. Moses. Really, thank you and welcome so much to the so many different communities that you've already engaged with in our valley, and the message that we are all brothers and sisters, that Martin Luther King certainly in his process of changing to develop change in society came to such a great understanding and sharing that clarion call with us as well. Let's see. I'd like to bring two students to be spotlighted at this moment. We have Prashanti Limbu and Denise. Denise, where did I put your last name? Please forgive me. Denise and Prashanti are two of our seniors that are graduating this year and have really had the lived experience of going online and working with change in how to become part of the community at large as they will be graduating this year. But they are also here to share with us before we go into some breakout rooms that we can each have a few minutes to share and get to know the community a little bit as well. We'll put you in a group of 4 to 6 people, and for just a few minutes to have the opportunity to share with each other. We have had a grant from the Interfaith Youth Corps about courageous pluralism, and how does that help us engage with others, especially others that think very differently than us, and how do we listen in a way that we can really hear their story, or as as Dr. Moses mentioned, that we have to hear, I wrote it down here, the counter story that is needed, or the more inclusive story instead of just one side. So I hope that as we share some guidelines and share some quotes from Martin Luther King with you, that these you can take into the breakout rooms and share your feelings on them with one another, and just share who you are in the community, whether you're at Westminster or other places. And also maybe something about one of those quotes that you find uplifting and guiding in your lives. So Denise, I hope you are somewhere close by, and we will highlight Denise and Prashanti in order to share these guidelines. Denise, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right nearby. Thank you, Jan, for the little introduction. I'm not sure many of you can see my face with Jan's screen share, but I just want to share some happy thoughts with you guys. Thank you, Dr. Moses, for your stories. I did have to jump in a little late because of a class I had, but the parts that I did get to hear were really powerful. And having some people, some very close people in my life who are women of color and who have come from Chicago too, there are some connections there I could make, and to think about the impact that they have that's so drastically different than the impact that happens to me in those spaces is really powerful. So thank you for that conversation. I think we have Prashanti here too to introduce herself, but when she does that, we do want to share these guidelines with you guys to help continue the respectful and just really meaningful conversations that have been had today.
Sure.
Everyone, I'm Prashanti, and I'm, like Jan said, I'm a senior here at Westminster, and I too chimed in a little bit for the meeting. I just want to thank Dr. Moses for sharing their wonderful stories and all the experiences, and it was just great to hear from you, and sad to also hear about the experiences that you went through. And I just want to acknowledge that we are here for that reason, to know that such disparities exist, and we are here to make a change and to bring us all together and to connect us. And I would like to go like Denise to take the lead so that we can go through some of the things that we want to cover today. Denise, do you want to go?
Of
Do you
course.
see the first slide? Is it up on guidelines for sharing?
Yeah.
I certainly see the slide. I hope everyone can
Okay.
see the same thing. So we'll just bounce through a couple of these things. We want them to be on the screen, and we want to say them out loud because we feel that they're really important aspects of having these helpful conversations that really open doors for differences in understanding and such. So to start, we believe it's really important to be respectful of all and to represent yourself, and that it's okay to have your own beliefs and to know that others will respect them.
And we have to know when to step back and step up, as in a room. If we are saying too much, maybe we could give others space to talk and to represent themselves and to talk, and also to acknowledge that if we are not being heard, then also to step up and voice out your opinions, because we believe that we can work together by listening to everybody. And another one is do not leave your beliefs at the door. And we realize that we are from different walks of life, and we have our own different background, and we have so much to share and to contribute. So if you want to bring all the stories, all those experiences, and you want to have the changes you want to see, then we would like you to bring your beliefs inside the team, the table, so that we can work together on it.
Great. So, and then next is to ask questions to seek clarification. Sometimes in difficult conversations, it turns out that it's a misunderstanding of what someone says, that you might have the same thought or that you might have different thoughts. And it's really important to try and understand what someone's really trying to say to move forward in a conversation. And then with that is to agree to disagree. If it turns out that you have very different views than someone else, that's totally okay. as long as everyone is being respectful and that these views or these comments aren't hurtful or harmful, that it's okay to have differences.
So another one is use I statements. As you're bringing yourself, you want to represent yourself. And for so long, I did not feel so well to just go and talk about what I feel as an individual and what I could bring to the table. So yeah, I think we should reemphasize on the fact that we can bring I statements and how you feel, how I feel, I Prashanti, an individual feel in the group or wherever we are at. So we just want to encourage everybody to use that statement more often. And remember the importance of someone's faith or moral traditions in their lives. Since we are from different backgrounds, different faiths, so that's why there could be some differences, and we just want everybody to know that we have to accept that, and also to make sure that we respect that as it is their part of their life, and we can move forward, because differences can also make us work together and bring us more together if we can really work together.
Okay, and then the last one for this slide is to remember that everyone has the right to pass. You don't always have to talk, and sometimes you're not ready to, and that's totally okay. There's a lot to gain from listening to others.
Those are great guidelines. Great.
So this other side, the students came up with faculty and staff in a gathering February 20th, 2020, right before we were no longer allowed together, but in a courageous pluralism gathering of a coexist cafe, these additional thoughts came together. And the first one, this was just after the George Floyd incidents, and that this was one of the thoughts that people had in order, the first of how we need to engage with difference and building community. If you can just read them through so that it can move along a little faster, and we'll get to the quotes this time. Thank you, guys.
Of course, I can start off here. So a few of the things that help to keep these conversations open and full of love are taking a deep breath, softening the rhetoric we use. Remember that your words carry a lot of weight, and calmly engaging with those deep differences.
Others would be practice respectful speech, and do not bully or insult anyone. And another one would be to accept others' points of view as true from them as yours are to you. And another one is to develop and practice virtues of humility, tolerance, patience, and courage, so that we can all work together and move forward.
Okay, and then move out of your echo chamber. So being open to listening to hearing different views and different things, reevaluating your beliefs and your old assumptions, and questioning where and how we learn things.
We also have to focus on equity and inclusion and not colorblindness. And we have to make sure we engage in careful collective actions like surveys, and also trying to maybe move towards consultation, collective action, and just something that would make us work together and bring about a collective change.
So with those guides and that the students, faculty, and staff of Westminster have come up with, we'd like to share this list, and I'll put it in the chat that you can go to this slide deck and you can download it onto your own computer screen, so you'll have all of these for yourself. But if you could just read the quotes directly out loud, alternating, then we will go into our breakout rooms and have a little bit of a conversation before we come back to a one-on-one with Dr. Moses and myself, sharing a few ideas that maybe have come up in the thoughts today and questions, as well as sending us off together. So with reading these quotes, appreciate you too, and then we will get you into some breakout rooms for a small amount of time to share and get to know yourselves and thoughts that you've had about these quotes today. I'll share it in the chat room too while they're reading them.
Certainly. So I'll read a couple and then we'll just keep passing it off. So, quote, "Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. And injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Quote, the time is always right to do what is right. Another one. We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Okay, I'll catch that other one. The time is always right to do what is right. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. There we are. The curse of poverty has no justification in our age. Every person, must decide what they or he will walk in the light of creative altruism or in the darkness of destructive selfishness.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people.
Okay, and then to close it off, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education.
Thank you. So I hope you can all see in the chat where you can download the quotes that were just shared. And let's see. I need to just do a couple things back here. All right, have we got a gallery view here? And there will be time to ask questions after the breakout rooms. So just to answer that question in there. But we will now, if you've had a chance to download, I think the quotes, if you would like to go into the breakout rooms, there should be a call for you to head into. We're just putting people into whatever room, and we will pull you back in probably about 5, 6, 7 minutes. So you don't have a long time, but share who you are and some of the quotes and your thoughts. And we'll be back to talk to Dr. Moses. Thank you. Again, thank you all that are populating in. It is so wonderful to see you all here today and that we have had this time. I hope you enjoyed your time and got to meet someone, maybe someone new that you haven't met before in the larger sense of the Salt Lake or even national community. Some of you were lucky enough that way. And we hope that this event today is a beginning. And as Dr. Moses said, it's a Clarion call to action, that if we can think of what we're doing every day and how do we engage in bringing the community together. One of the statements from the Salt Lake Interfaith Roundtable's letter was that, we need to continually, almost on a daily basis, wake up and make sure that we are working on fostering positive relationships with all faiths and making room for greater love, harmony, and understanding, which the mission of the Interfaith Roundtable is to promote love, harmony, and understanding in our community across all beliefs and communities. So I'd like to call on Dr. Moses to kind of get into a little one-on-one. As the Director of Global Peace and Spirituality, or the GPS, Finding Our Way in the World Center at Westminster College, I've had the blessing to work with many pastors, people of faith, and students, faculty, and staff in conversations about how do we build community, and certainly with Martin Luther King's thoughts of the beloved community, and even more so with the thoughts of Dr. Moses and the impact of Martin Luther King on all of our lives. How do we really practice in our daily lives that clarion call? How do we really keep it at the forefront of who we are. And I'd like to start with that. I know that you talked, Dr. Moses, really just so beautifully, as the song that Samantha said earlier, that your sword can be in a sermon or the power of your pen. I love that line from that song as well. And certainly your talk with us today was certainly the power of your sword, of your words. So how would you like to continue with this conversation?
So I think that, I think change actually begins in the home, and the responsibility that we have at this present age. One of the mission that I brought to Calvary was what's called Christian Family Value System, a code of community codes and conduct that you impress in the home to make an impact for the future. And so it is important how we talk in the home, what our children hear, because the next generation are really honed by what they see happening now. And so I think it's very vital that we're very careful to have conversation in the home that's inclusive, that speaks of the humanity of mankind and loving one another, and that all people are created equal, because that will be very important with how the next generation will move forward. So I believe that first of all, it starts in the home.
Absolutely. And that's the place where every single one of us wakes up, whether we're in quarantine or not, to be able to connect with others that are either on a Zoom or right next to us in our space. I asked a couple students some questions that they might like to ask to you. And one was, in bringing peace and understanding, have you seen positive change over the years? And in light with that, what are those attributes that bring about a positive change?
I have seen positive change and I've seen negative setbacks, but I think that one of the attributes that have brought about positive change is when there's a willingness, as we mentioned in the speech, to hear one another and to acknowledge one another and to see one another, to say, okay, I see you. You're not just a person that exists. No, I see what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. And I'm having the compassion to listen. So it starts with being respectful of one another and listening to each other's experience, each other's lived experience. Yeah.
So I'd like to ask a question too. Out of so many amazing speeches that Martin Luther King gave, is there one of his clarion calls or one of his quotes that you call on in your own daily life?
Yes, actually the last speech, I've been to the mountaintop. I've looked at that over and over again because it speaks to the resiliency of Dr. King, as well as the faithfulness and the determination. I just sensed, and as I've watched that speech over and over again, I caught a tear in his eye when he said, I may not get there with you, where he had resolved that this cause was worth dying for. He once said that until one becomes comfortable with death and understanding that, you might die for the cause, you'll never be effective. But he said in that speech, he said, I, like any person, would want to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I've been to the mountaintop. I've looked over. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that we as a people would get to the promised land. And that speaks volume of not only his faith in the moment, but his vision for the future. And who would know that, in some years later, 2008 rather, the first Black president, Barack Obama, would be elected to the highest office in the country. And so, that speech right there, I've been to the mountaintop, it really echoes in my spirit.
Yeah. So there's a clarion call for all of us that haven't listened to that speech or watched it recently, that maybe that's something we could leave as an action plan. The other one that you mentioned too was, where do we go from here? And that, what would you say in there is one of your action items out of that speech that you mentioned in your talk earlier?
My wife and I was just having this conversation. As a matter of fact, we were just listening to Where Do We Go From Here probably a couple of days ago. And I think that one of the things that King was very adamant about was our commitment to the struggle, you know, and not riding the fence, but being committed to the struggle, which was, you know, a lot of the message that he gave. And I'm looking for the concurrent narrative. He challenged us. He challenged us, and not only just people that have been affected by the struggle, but for those who can help. That theme that he has in that sermon, as well as in the letter from the Birmingham jail, 1963, is that we are called to do something. We're called to action. We can't straddle the fence. We can't take a position of mediocrity or be moderate on certain. As a matter of fact, he says that some moderates are the most dangerous persons because they don't take a side. And where they could make an impact, they decide to remain neutral. So I think that that speech, where do we go from here, is a clarion call and a challenge for us to take a stand in a position.
One more question before I turn to a student question. If Tamara is watching for any questions as well, we could go to our audience. But that you mentioned 4 points within your talk.
Yes.
And I caught 2 of them very clearly.
Okay.
But could you just list those 4 for us one more time?
Number 1, a change begins with acknowledging the past. Change begins with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Change begins at home. So I said 4 and I gave you 3. Hold on one second. I think that's all I had for that one. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, the 4th one you said was a call worth dying for.
I'm sorry. Those were takeaways. I'm sorry. I gave you the wrong set of points here.
I got that we're all connected and that there's a call to a cause worth dying for.
Right.
But there was 2 in the middle that I, blurred.
I apologize. We are called to be consistent in every context concerning racism.
Okay.
That was the second one.
That's your commitment again, too.
Yeah.
And what was the 3rd of those
The third
points?
one was we are called to the challenge to live together peacefully.
Well, I certainly have written many notes that are very mixed on my little piece of paper here and appreciate every point that you made. And this commitment, though, too, I think is a question that sometimes we lose hope when we see the days blur into one and another atrocity happens and our hearts are sinking again and again and again. So how do you find that hope to keep going and that sense of commitment? Once again, I open my eyes to another day where the light has been given and I'm up off my bed.
Yeah.
What is my challenge and how can I keep that light going?
Hope is the defiant resistance, not to resign or resolve in my situation, but to believe. And you're moving around my dissertation right now. So, hope says that there is a power beyond the power. And from my spiritual biblical worldview, that there's a God beyond my situation. But not only that, there's a God that is sovereign, that rules, that reigns. But number 2, he loves me. That's hopeful, because if he had all power but didn't love me, I would be in a miserable situation. So he's sovereign, God of love, but then he's providential, that he does not allow life to just unfold by itself, but that he actually, as I like to say, slip his hands into the glove of humanity, and he gets involved in our daily lives. He's able to uphold his creation. And so no matter what I'm going through, I believe in the providence of God. And the providence of God says that no matter what good things happen to me, bad things happen to me, ugly things happen to me, they're all designed to bring me to a victorious outcome. And so the scripture that I cling to, and what my wife's favorite scripture, is Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and to those who are the called according to his purpose. And so that gives me hope to know that God has a strategy. He has a plan to bring me to an expected end.
We have one question in the chat that I think that all of our attendees can connect with. It's from Paul, and he asks, in order to embrace hope and change? How do we begin to forgive those who have spitefully used us?
It's a challenging question, but I've come to discover, Paul, that forgiveness is not so much for the other person as it is for you. Forgiveness allows you to move on. And if you cannot forgive, it keeps you stuck right there. I remember when Nelson Mandela got out of jail, he had a conversation with Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton said, how were you able to forgive all of those people that kept you in Robben Island in the prison for 27 years? He said, I realized that if I did not forgive them, I would be stuck right back there in that prison. And so forgiveness gives you the opportunity to move on and from the Christian perspective, it's challenging. It's challenging, but it's a call to stretch our faith, a strengthening of our faith, a stretching of our faith, to pray for those who spitefully abuse you or misuse you, and pray for those who treat you wrong, that God would open their eyes to see the error of their ways. I'm not saying it's easy, Paul, but it is the clarion call, the challenge that we have to grow as individuals and to grow and to stretch our human existence here on earth.
Thank you. I think looking at what are those qualities that we have no control over what others do to us or how they are. But if we believe in a higher source, whether it's the sense that the universe is in existence and there's a call of those of us of faith, that certainly it's that creator, the unknowable essence, God, Allah. And all faiths have that belief that do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. How do we live that? What are the qualities that we need to develop with hope, with courage, with forgiveness? Is there some qualities that you feel are especially helpful?
Long suffering and patience. Doesn't have all of them.
Yes, yes.
Long suffering and patience.
Oh, that patience one I am challenged with.
Yeah. I think we all have areas that we, need to improve on. But yeah, it is what I like to call the pilgrimage in faith. It's a journey. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon.
Yeah. And the point that you bring to us as well is that it's not about just us, or just myself, but it is about us as all of us together. And how do I change myself, since I can't change others, in order to change the world? So that personal transformation for transformation of the world. And if in conclusion, if there's anything that you would like to say, we're rounding into our final minute here. I'd just like to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation and sharing your stories with us. That if there's some kind of part of that clarion call that we've been given many ideas for how to make a change every day, starting with the home, starting with our friends and our faith, our sense of who we are, that oneness of humanity that we all need to see in our own way. What would you like to leave as the final words of thank you to this crowd today?
I would like to reemphasize that we're all connected and that we are all tied into the single garment of destiny, as King has said. But also, recently we just lost Bishop Tutu. And it was Bishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela that really highlighted this word that I mentioned, this African word, Ubuntu. Mm-hmm. Ubuntu means I am because we are. And we cannot exist without one another. We need one another, and in essence, to survive. And I'll close on this. I tell you, about 3 weeks ago, there's another white lady at our church who I love dearly, Lynn Green. She brings this to me. This statue right here. This statue represents Ubuntu. It's people showing their lives connected, and it speaks of community. So in order for us to move forward, in this present day, we have to recognize that I can't hurt you or you can't hurt me and expect for everyone not to hurt. We have to love one another and respect one another if we expect to expand and move forward in this way.
Thank you. Thank you again so much, Dr. Moses. And thank you, Dr. Tamara Stevenson, for helping collaborate with all these events for the Martin Luther King week and month of events. And I'd like to thank all the students and participants that are here, faculty and staff, and community members. And in my faith tradition, there's a quote that says, "So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth." I hope that we leave this day illuminating with our own light. So powerful is our own light that it can spread and illuminate the whole world. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mhm.